We're here to idea you, to fire up your curiosity and connect you with the people and ideas that shape our world. Watch, listen, understand, connect, and create. Let's move the human story forward together.
Welcome to ideaXme. I'm Neil Koenig. Can you produce pork without pigs? That's the question that Uncommon, a Cambridge-based startup, is trying to answer. The venture is one of several in the emerging field of cultivated meat. This new kind of food is not produced on a farm, but instead is grown in a lab or factory. Proponents believe that cultivated meat can offer health and other benefits, as well as playing a role in making food production more sustainable. I met Uncommon's co-founder, Benjamina Bollag, at the recent symposium organised by the students of St. Gallen University in Switzerland. I began this interview with Benjamina by asking her to tell us a little more about herself and her background.
I actually grew up in Switzerland, so not too far from here in Geneva, and I then moved to London about 12 years ago to study at Imperial College Chemical Engineering. And I did it in a small startup, but realized I really wanted to do something that had a huge impact on people's health. And that's when I joined an accelerator called Entrepreneur First. And within that, got started with Uncommon now about 6 years ago. And at Uncommon, started it really with the purpose of doing something for health, and then went more narrow by working on cultivated meat. And now we're thinking about how do we take it broader and not just work within cultivated meat, but also use our technologies to enable biotech to be more accessible across the planet.
Was your background, did you study science?
So I studied chemical engineering, but I would say definitely it's my co-founder that is the scientist. So our chief scientific officer and my co-founder, Dr. Ruth Farham, has about 20 years of cell and molecular biology experience, did master's, PhD, 3 postdocs at Oxford University. So we couldn't choose if we went to Oxford or London between the Oxford Imperial background, so we ended up in Cambridge.
Yes, well, we won't go into the
politics,
the rivalry between those various institutions. Where did the idea for this project come from?
So the concept of cultivated meat has been around since the 1970s. So making meats using cell culture technologies is not something I've invented, is not as new. Where we came in is how do we create technologies that allow us to scale it? So how do we make it more affordable? How do we make it more available? And how do we make it more desirable? And those technologies came by working on it. So I spent about 2 years really understanding what others had been doing and the technologies that were out there, and then partnered with Ruth, and she's the main inventor behind a lot of our technologies.
But how did you become interested, first of all, in the idea of what is now known as cultivated meat? And we'll come on to explain what that is in a moment.
Yeah, so for me, I would say it started in childhood in a way. My dad kind of throughout my whole childhood and adulthood kind of put in my head that health is everything, and I can complain about anything, it would always shut me down, like, well, how's your health? And if my health was good, then nothing else mattered. And he also in parallel kind of had some health issues, and I think seeing him go through having a kidney transplant and the horrors of dialysis before that as well made me realize I wanted to do something in health and that affected people's health. And that's where, when I joined Entrepreneur First, I iterated on different ideas. So actually started with a mental health idea, but I discarded that quite quickly because it was not a good idea, and then came across cultivated meat.
So it was just a sort of serendipitous thing. You thought you were taking part in this startup accelerator.
Exactly, and I think the way I see it, you want for your career to do something, it's a bit of a Venn diagram. So you want to do, the mission and the purpose, which for me was around health, but you also want to do something you're decently good at and that you enjoy the everyday of it. So I'm less good, for example, in the lab. So if I was pipetting all day towards cancer research, it wouldn't be the right fit for me. So you want somewhere where you can have an impact, you enjoy what you're doing, but also obviously the bigger impact on the world.
So what is cultivated meat?
Yeah, so the way it works is that we take a small sample of cells from the animal, in our case a pig, and then we get the cells to become similar to embryonic stem cells so that they can grow a lot. And we do that without any gene editing. And we get the cells to grow, and then we turn them into muscle and fat. And then we had different plant-based proteins and fats and nutrients so that we give the cells more texture and also enhance the flavor.
Well, there's quite a lot in what you've just said, particularly for a wide general audience. How much of a sample do you need, and how much can you make from that sample?
So we don't need much in theory. In reality, for example, we try and take bigger samples when the animal is not alive. When it's alive, it's easier because you can go back to it. But what we need for the novel food regulations is to also show the kind of how our samples compare to the original animal. And for that, you need more bigger quantities. But for us, we could take the little, when the cows get the little ear patch, that's enough. You can have a tiny skin sample. The technologies that we use got a Nobel Prize for it back in 2012. And that's because you can take any cell in the body and get it to expand pretty much infinitely. So it's a pretty cool technology.
Okay, so you got your sample. Then what? How do you make it expand? Presumably you need lots of other raw materials. Where do they come from and what are they?
We're trying essentially, if you want, to mimic blood, and that's why originally people use fetal bovine serum that we don't use at all. So it's a mixture of amino acids, different vitamins, sugars, and things like growth factors as well to try and push the cells to either grow more or become muscle or fat.
Where does this take place? In a huge vat, in a vast factory?
Exactly. So at the moment we don't have yet the huge factory. We have a pilot plant that's situated in Cambridge, so it's about a 15,000 square foot facility.
You're still really at the development stage, aren't you? What's the hope? You're going to scale this up so there are huge factories everywhere making this product?
Exactly. So with pork, we're looking to create our own brand, and then with other animals, we're open to more B2B partnerships.
Going back to the raw materials, I mean, what are the sources of these raw materials? Are they basically all derived from plants?
Yeah, so it depends. It depends which ones, and we do look at the whole supply chain and the sustainability angle. The main factor actually from a sustainability angle is less the raw materials. We don't use a lot of growth factors, so those are the ones that typically require fermentation and a lot of energy, and we don't use a lot, and in some cases not at all. We replace it with RNA technologies that require a lot less of it. But the main thing is when we have those big vats, where is our energy source from? And at manufacturing scale, we'll be using fully renewable energy.
Now, you mentioned two phrases which again might be slightly mysterious to our audience, growth factors and RNA. First of all, what are growth factors?
So growth factors are proteins that help tell the cells essentially to grow or turn into different types of tissues. We use RNA to replace a lot of the growth factors or small molecules. So the principle is actually similar to the vaccine, in that it's a messenger RNA that tells your cells what to do, except we have a delivery method that's relying on completely natural materials, and it's a different purpose. So we use it to direct our cells to become muscle versus targeted disease.
Now, RNA has been somewhat in the news recently because
Yes.
of the pandemic.
That's
it
right.
played a role in development of vaccines. So just explain what RNA is and how you can make use of it.
Yeah, so I mean, RNA is one of the main building blocks of life, right? Messenger RNA essentially tells your cells what to do in very brief. And so we use it to tell our cells to become muscle. And it's, you know, one of the big, if you remember from the vaccines, one of the big problems was that it had to be refrigerated at, you know, -80, and the supply chain of that. And actually, for us, it's some way a good thing, because that means that it's inherently unstable, so it's not in the end product. So we get it to do, you know, to get our cells to do what we want, but actually by the time that you eat our product, it's not there anymore at all. And that's one of the reasons we decided to work with it.
That's a very interesting use of something that was a problem in one field and a real bonus in another.
Exactly.
Are other players in this market also using RNA?
So not in the way that we are. So we've patented quite broadly, and no one uses it in the way we are. And we believe that will allow us to be one of the companies that, without gene editing, can really scale and bring both availability and affordability to the consumer.
Okay, here's another phrase: gene editing. What's that?
So gene editing can come with many different forms, but typically is when you actually alternate the genome of the cells. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. The problem is that in Europe, it's very difficult to go through regulatory approval with anything that is genome, where the genome is actually edited, compared to us, where it doesn't integrate at all the genome.
So that's an advantage for you then?
Exactly, because we can bring, you know, we want this to be all around the world. We're starting with UK, US, but we do want to bring this to Europe, and Europe is one of the big pork markets, so it's important for us to be able to be available throughout the world.
Now, let's move on to the actual product. What does it look like, and how would you buy it in a shop? What would you get?
So our first product is bacon. So we wanted to choose a product that people really love, but also there's not enough good alternatives when it comes to bacon. And we see also it's a product that has a lot of benefits, but also a lot of things that are not quite right with it. And there's a lot of antibiotics in pork, but also it's something that people feel is, you know, you feel quite heavy when you eat bacon. And so there's a lot that we can do from a product proposition, so that we don't just say, oh, this is more sustainable, but actually something that the consumers enjoy more. And that's what we're working on.
What does it look like?
It looks like bacon. I would say from a looks perspective and texture perspective, we're pretty much spot on. On the taste, it's very similar, but there's some nuances that we're still working. So give us a couple of years, and we'll have it indistinguishable.
Do you add salt?
We do.
And what about some of the preservatives that people are worried about? Do you have to add those, or can you get away with not using those?
So we're still testing different solutions. I probably can't answer that one yet.
Oh, okay.
But hopefully not. I mean, we grow our cells in a contained environment, and there's a lot less chance of foodborne diseases. So I think it's an area, you know, if not for the first products, we can definitely have an impact on the longer term.
So your bacon will come off a production line, and then what? How does it get to the supermarket, and what will the consumer find on the shelf?
So we expect it to be very similar. We have a new angle when it comes to the branding, but actually in terms of the product itself, we expect it to be very similar. We'll start with something maybe partially cooked and more restaurants to start with, just so that people can get used to the product, and then go to supermarkets. So that's a few years later.
What do professional chefs make of this? Have you shown them your prototypes yet?
Yeah, we have to a few. I think, you know, people are excited by it, but I think chefs are really picky. So there's a few more things as well we want to improve and perfect. But we've seen already actually other companies bring to market through some of the best, the world's best chefs, their products.
I remember a few years ago I did a piece about the use of 3D printing in food, and talked to a top chef in Barcelona, and I was saying to him that, you know, traditionalists might say this is an outrage using technology in food, and he said, no, the chefs have been using new technology for centuries. Exactly.
I think it's a great place to start. I think what we want to be careful is that we do want this to really have an impact. We need this to go to the masses and not just stay with the high-end restaurants. And so we want to make sure that when we launch, it goes, yes, through chefs, and we work with chefs, but it's also accessible throughout the world to different people.
Is branding going to be important then?
Yes, very. And we think we have quite a different proposition when it comes to the branding. We have a different target market, and we've seen that we get about 77% of purchase intent in that specific target with our proposition.
And you've got to make it cool, haven't you?
Yes, although I think one of the main things that plant-based meat had an issue with is that they made it cool to try it, but they didn't focus enough on the retention. And that's what made it very difficult because, you know, compared to typically, you know, meat, bread, things that people purchase on a daily basis, you have like 80% retention on products, whereas plant-based, if you had, the people that had 20 were actually on the top end. Most people had more around 11% repurchase rates. And that's something we need to do differently, and to make sure that it's not just cool to try it, but cool to eat it on a continuous basis.
What do the vegan and vegetarian communities make of this?
So I guess the short answer is it matters less. Our target is not the vegan and vegetarian community. We're looking at some flexitarians as well, but less the kind of core vegan community. They already don't eat meat, so it's less of an issue. But we've seen mixed responses. Some are really excited by it and see the potential for it. They understand that people are not going to go vegan, and therefore, you know, they see it as an opportunity, whereas some are still uncomfortable with the idea that people need to have something similar than meat, and say, well, why don't we just all eat, you know, beans and carrots, and it will be fine.
Do you think you have a taste advantage over, say, the plant-based products?
I think so. I think actually as a company, even our plant-based product itself, so we have a pure plant-based formulation. We've had people coming from other plant-based meat companies or even meat companies taste it, and they said it's way beyond any bacon product on the market, and even any bacon product they've tried in R&D. So I'm really confident that, you know, given our plant-based alone is already incredibly better, with the cells, it's really going to blow out of the water everything else.
If this is a success, and there are lots of plants making this kind of stuff, that might come with some disadvantages, mightn't it? I mean, that's probably a lot of energy we're talking about. And you might be a player that wants to use sustainable sources for the energy, but maybe not everyone will.
Yes, I think the majority, when I speak to colleagues in the industry, you know, it's a very tight industry. I think we're all aligned that we need this to happen. I think the whole market, the energy market, is shifting to be more and more sustainable. And I think that's the cool thing is, you know, we are advancing, but there's other technologies on the side that are advancing. I mean, by the time that we're really at an enormous scale, maybe we'll even have fusion, right? And so there's a lot of technologies that are happening in parallel. So I think one of the things when people criticize the sector, they get it wrong, is that they often even talk about technologies of 5 years ago, but the main thing is that they don't even look at how the adjacent technologies are going to progress at the same time as us. So they said, well, you're going to have to use energy, it's too expensive. Well, yes, but people are working on more cheaper, sustainable options. Even with the RNA technologies, we see there's so much going on in the biotech field. So we work on how do we use what we have to help them, but also vice versa. And the whole economy is progressing together.
How can you keep track or keep ahead of any problems that with food safety, with this product, that might take a while to emerge?
Again, it's coming back to what I just said. I think we are evolving as a company at the same time. So we're not just going to go from where we are to having 100 plants and taking over the whole meat industry in 2 days, right? Like, things take time. It takes time to create, to build new plans, to evolve. And during that time, we can keep track. And I think, in a way, we're lucky that we're starting this sector at a time that we are aware of sustainability, that we are aware of all these safety aspects. I think the other thing is, things are becoming more and more personalized. So actually another portfolio company of our investors called Zoe, for example, right? They look at more personalized nutrition, and we're lucky that tools like that are there, and we can leverage that when we scale up. So maybe, version 1 might not have it, but version 2, 3 can make, as we scale and as this grows to the full population, we can make sure that things are more personalized and right for everyone. Because the main thing is red wine is great for some people and maybe others less so, and that's why it's so, I think, confused.
So we're going from personalized medicine to personalized food.
Exactly.
Well,
both are still evolving.
Is it going to be possible in the future, do you think, for you to order a very particular kind of bacon that only you like or whatever? Can you be that specific?
I think at some point, yes, it's going to take some time. It's going to be more of a mix and match, right? You could be saying like the percentage of fat, maybe specific nutrients that you want. I think for the first maybe few years, it's going to be more categories. Some people are doing 3D printing, so already starting with that, but the scale of it is a bit smaller.
What about religious communities, religious groups? What's the reaction from those groups so far, or is it still too early?
Yeah, it's quite early, I would say. We work in pork. It's a 400 billion market without some of the big religions in it, and so from a business perspective, I would say it's more of a philosophical than a business perspective question. I think halal will be difficult. There's already difficulties with anything that comes back to the pig, even in the medical sector. From a kosher perspective, we hear mixed things. I think people that are already on the verge might eat it, but I think the very religious market is probably going to be the really late adopters.
This presumably also offers the chance of creating entirely new foods.
Yes. So there are a company, for example, Vow in Australia, that are taking a completely different approach and going for more exotic animals, for example. The way we think about it is we want to really reduce the kind of friction for the consumer. There is already so much, as you mentioned, for you to get your head around, like this is cells, this is mixed with some plants, this, that. There's so much to get your head around. We don't want to add another layer, so we wanted at least to look and taste familiar, at least at the start.
The aim of this series is to talk to people who are trying to move the human story forward. Is that what you're hoping your project is going to do?
It is. Our mission is really to be the greatest enablers of a healthier world, and to do that through cultivated meat, but also to partner with biotech companies and enable therapeutic solutions. So it's really, it's really what we're pushing for every day.
And 5-10 years' time, where would you hope the project to be?
So I think in 5-10 years' time, we hope to be in multiple geographies, so across the planet. So both in the US, in Europe, but also in Asia. We hope to have big factories and really be in the multiple billion revenues. And that's with pork, but also have partnerships when it comes to the other meats, and have seen that our technologies have an impact on iPS therapies or vaccines as well.
So you're not thinking yourselves of going into chicken or other flavors? You do that with other people? Exactly.
It makes it easier to partner in those species if we say our brand sticks to pork for now.
Benjamina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us for this episode of the ideaXme Show. ideaXme is a global platform. Our mission is to move the human story forward by sharing knowledge of the future. You can find us on all major audio networks at www.radioideame.com, on YouTube and Vimeo. Please subscribe.